Hey everyone, welcome to Pop XP. And before the show starts, make sure to click that subscribe button and click the bell to get notifications when we go live and we upload awesome new content. And don't forget, if you can, make sure to share our stream on all your social media outlets. We appreciate it, and thanks for helping us grow the Pop XP channel. What is going on, YouTube? Welcome. Mr. Teen Sensation Billy Tucci is in the house, and as you know, the brain of the mainframe here now, Skylar with the Pop XP. Tucci!
Skylar. You caught me off guard. I think you're gonna play a musical intro.
Oh, did I now?
Yeah. And then I'm thinking, man, we should have had Steve on the show.
Billy.
Steve, he would have
loved it.
Dan, let me talk to you.
Let me tell you something.
He's a Marvel guy, though, right?
He is a Marvel guy.
Yeah.
I tried to convince them to do a DC themed episode for once, and they said they had something, but they're holding off a little bit. They're going to continue down the Marvel streak as they go through the 70s and early 80s of books and whatnot. We actually just did a recording Tuesday night with Steve Englehart, which was really good. Yeah. It was great. So that's going to premiere next Wednesday at 8 p.m. That'll be uploaded. Cheers to you, my friend. Glad to be streaming with you. It's been a bit busy time. Conventions, campaigns. Man.
Yeah, man, dude. I've done well. I don't know if you want to. Our guest that's coming up. I had a delightful conversation with him and his lovely wife Leilani at the Baltimore Comic-Con, which was awesome. But dude, that was my third Comic-Con in 4 weeks. For some reason they just came all together, and then we went on vacation the week before that, before school started or whatever, the end of September. I don't know. Maybe it's Jewish holidays or something. So I haven't been home in like 5 weeks. What's up with that?
I don't know. Does it feel good to be home?
Feels great to be home with you.
Did you take a nice shower?
Took a hot shower.
A nice hot steamy shower. Get your jams. Have some pork rinds. Pet your puppy.
Well, now
dude,
it's coming up, so this is gonna be great. All the codes.
Yeah, it's gonna be great. So right before we were getting ready, I just happened to pop on social media, do a couple things, and I saw this meme come up that just had me dying, man. And as a fan of Mrs. Doubtfire, I saw this. Kim Kardashian hires elderly woman as housekeeper, and you got Kanye as like Mrs. Doubtfire. That cracked me up, man. That was awesome. But let's get into it. Let's get into it. Who do we got tonight, Billy? Who do we got? Come on.
Oh, we've got one of the most accomplished people in comics, and one of the what do you say? Most well-known figureheads in the last 20 years. Let's say.
I would say.
Who's now branching out on his own, teaming up with the legendary Frank Miller. And some other super studettes. But ladies and gentlemen, well, without further ado, why don't we introduce you all to our tonight's guest, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Dan DiDio.
Boom. Dan, welcome.
That's quite the intro, Billy, and cheers to you as well.
Cheers to you. Cheers.
Are you drinking Peroni?
I am doing the Peroni, yes, I am.
I'm drinking Stella's.
Nice. That's okay. Same couple of bottles. It works.
Yeah, Nile, what are you drinking?
I stole one of my wife's Trulies because I'm out of beer.
Oh, wow.
I'm just living it up, you know. Just living it up. This is great. But no, this is great. I'm so happy to have you on, Dan. I've hounded you for a while to come on, so this is great to finally get a chance to talk to you. I've admired your work for years, what you've done, what you've accomplished. So it's great to sit here and chat with you about all this stuff. And I know you and Billy go way back, but what I would love to do is I always just like to start off with the origin story. You know, how did Dan DiDio get into comics?
Oh gosh, it's a rather strange route for me to get into comics because I've been reading comics. I was 10 years old, so reading comics for over 50 years. Buying comics, going to conventions since I was 10 also. But then if you flash forward back into the mid 80s, I was always interested in going to working for comics, even though I was doing other jobs. I spent 20 years in TV, working for ABC and CBS and working in children's programming, animation, a lot of things like that. But I always had an interest in comics. I did a lot of applied new talent showcase. We got a name mentioned in Foom magazine for turning into character. Remember Foom magazine? So you did all the routes any little fanboy would do with the attempt to trying to get into comics and never succeeding. Lo and behold, I make friends with a neighbor of mine, Jimmy Palmiotti, when I was in Brooklyn. And once we found out we had a shared interest in comics, not only did I hit him up for his comp boxes and get as many books as possible when he wasn't looking, But I also found a way to meet people through him and work with them. And then, we flash forward. Jimmy and I basically start working together. Jimmy and I start working together on a couple of projects, pitching into like things like 2090. It was remember Marvel 2099? We pitched the Marvel 2099 series. Then ultimately, through a long series of events, we wound up on Superboy through a rather bizarre story in its own right. But as I'm writing with Superboy, I was also working in animation, and I was looking to get back on the East Coast. And I had a friend of mine basically set me up. This is true. Set me up on a blind date with Paul Levitz. I actually went to meet one person. I went to meet my friend to have dinner with him, and he goes, "This is Paul Levitz. He's looking for somebody with comic knowledge, but with outside experience." And he says, "You have comic knowledge, and you're looking to get back on the East Coast. You two have dinner together. I'm going to go somewhere else." And he left us together. Then over the course of about 3 months and about 6 interviews, Paul created a position for me at DC. It wasn't even an existing job. They created a position for me because they wanted to bring me in. And, and it was funny that during the third interview of the 6 interviews, he goes, "What?" He asked the same question. "What other connections do you have to comics?" And I said, "Well, Paul, I'm actually co-writing Superboy right now with Jimmy Palmiotti." And he had this big rack of comics behind him, and he turned around, pulled the comic off the rack, looked at it, and he goes, "Damned if you aren't," and he put it back on the shelf, which was this interesting moment. So again, after a while, they set me up for this job, and I got in, and I was at DC for about a year, and it was interesting because I really didn't know much, and I was learning on the position, learning about how the whole company worked and everything like that, and there's a lot of frustration that comes with that. Because ultimately you're trying to get involved, but you don't have the full knowledge to be able to make things work that you want to do. But after a year, I got a good handle of what was about. And as the story goes, I was ready to leave the company. I was ready to go back and try to get back into animation, do something else, because it just wasn't working for me. But I presented a treatise to Paul, this whole idea of how to rearrange the company and work with things. And he literally says to me, he goes, "Here, let's put this other discussion aside and let's look at what you want to do. And I'll do nearly everything that you have in this document with a couple of changes." And one of the changes was, that's when he offered me the executive editor position at DC. And I have to say, if you guys are long comic fans, you'll know what I mean by this. Mm-hmm. You ever have that when you're a kid, you ask you, what are the things you want to be when you grow up, And for me, I got a chance to work in programming and TV, which was one of them, strangely. And all of a sudden, this job's put in front of me that, little 10-year-old Dan DiDio probably would have, been saying this was his career path, without any knowledge. And which is good because I never thought I could become an astronaut. I get really tight places get me nervous. So this seemed to work as a good alternate. And then we're off to the races from there.
Very cool. Now, you worked in animation. Now, did you work on, if my memory serves me correct, did you work on ReBoot?
Yes, I did. As a matter of fact, I was the network executive on ReBoot. Then ultimately, when I left ABC, I was the story editor for 2 seasons of ReBoot as well. And then I was actually an officer with the company, Mainframe Entertainment, which still is probably one of the finest working experiences of my life, working there. Just a great group of people, great environment. We were basically a cutting edge company, pushing computer animation before computer animation was chic. Nobody knew what it was. And we were out there hand selling it in a way that was unique, because we were trying to convince people that this could be on TV. And the only thing that they had to compare computer animation to was Ants and Toy Story, were both feature films. Right. But ReBoot was there. I was working on that series. I had a little hand-on, got involved in things like Beast Wars, Beast Machines for a while.
Yeah.
And did a number of series there. There's one series I also story edited and wrote scripts for was War Planets, which is known as Shadow Raiders in Canada. And a couple of last things I did before leaving that company was I actually worked on the Barbie direct-to-videos, which is a lot of fun. And also my last project at Mainframe, ironically, was Spider-Man for MTV. We did
cool.
the computer animation for Spider-Man for MTV. Yeah.
That was awesome. Yeah, ReBoot really really was like, it blew my mind back then
Yeah.
when that came out. I wait every Saturday, because that was part of that Saturday morning block. I was
Yeah,
just like in awe because you never saw anything like that. Like, yeah, right. You had Toy Story and stuff, but like
yeah.
now it was on TV and it was weekly. It was freaking amazing.
I
It
didn't
was
even know
it was
Toy
it was the
Story
first.
was out by then, though. This
What's
seems
that?
to preceded Toy Story. Wasn't that like 92,
It was
93, 94?
Toy Story's like 93,
Six.
94, and Reboot's introduced in 94. One of the principles, you got to know the origin of Mainframe. One of the principles of Mainframe is this guy who a friend of mine and my boss at the time, Ian Pearson. Him and his team were computer animators, and actually they did the animation for the Dire Straits "Money for Nothing" video. The two plumbers, the guys at the
Yeah.
side.
Yeah.
They did that animation, and from that animation, that's where they brokered the deal to get Reboot made. And Reboot starts very, very simplistic and develops as technology develops. They kept on updating the look and style of the show. It's really it was a fascinating moment of time. And the fun part, though, and going back to comics, everybody there was comic fans, and literally we spoke in comic book shorthand when we went there, and if we had problems figuring out stories or designs, there would always be a comic book reference. And it didn't hurt that the designer for the company at the time, the art director, was Brendan McCarthy, who's a very accomplished comic book artist as well. And he would sit in the room and he would draw on this whiteboard as we were discussing story. And ultimately, I remember being stuck one time, and everybody was trying to figure out a look for a world that we're trying to create in the web. And we went. Everybody almost went Dormammu together. We all went, and it was like this weird moment. Everybody said Dormammu, and it was like, yeah, now I get it. And Brenda drew this beautiful design for the world, and but it was this fun aspect of just this level of collaboration, and just the room just fighting against the waves. And I think a lot of that is what I feel when I'm starting up with Frank on Frank Miller Presents. It's easy to be part of a big company, but even regardless of how well you're known or respected, to start something up and to battle, and to push in the middle of a very crowded market, it's a lot of work, but it's extraordinarily rewarding when you do it.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you one thing, whenever you do these live shows, you always get these trolls that come in, especially this Jimmy Palmiotti guy, Spider-Man cartoon stole the Gatecrasher style they developed at Mainframe.
Absolutely. Actually, you know what?
Way to go, Dan.
It's a little true. If you wanted the truth, we had at Mainframe, we had worked with Jimmy and Amanda and Mark Wade developing the Gatecrasher book that they had done for Black Bolt. So I got the rights to that, and we were developing it. And we actually had it in development over at Fox for about a year and a half, and we were developing a process called Toon Shader, which gives it a more animation style feel, so it's not as harsh or as slick as the older style computer animation. And Fox brought it all the way to the end. I thought we were going to get that show, but they pulled the plug at the last minute. But all the development that we did on the technology for Gatecrasher actually helped sell us on Spider-Man. And no, Jimmy, there were no royalties for you on that. Sorry.
Oh. Well, you wonder,
He's deleting that. That was his next question.
Oh, I know. That's usually his first question. That's not his last.
You look at where where computer animation is today, as opposed to, say, 30 years ago when you were developing it, and you just wonder how much memory did these computers hold at the time? Was it maybe like 10 megabytes? Like, oh my God, it's like 10 megabytes. You remember,
Well, the guys used to because of the amount of product we were pushing through, and we're at Mainframe, and the high point of Mainframe, we did 52 half hours and a 1 hour movie in 1 year. That's how much we did. More computer animation at a Mainframe in 1 year than every other studio combined in that same year. That's what a machine this place was. And but in the earlier days, it's funny because the animators were so dedicated and so hardworking. They would be at their computer console, right? And they'd be in sleeping bags, sitting in sleeping bags, and they'd be animating. And when it came time to render, because these files were so heavy, they would actually sleep at their console in their sleeping bag while they were rendering overnight. And then when the render was done, they'd go back and start animating again. And that's the level of crazy dedication that you had from those guys in those days. Yeah.
And that chick was hot too.
Oh, hey, listen, I can say it now.
It's like, damn.
There was. I should have. I'm going to tell the story.
Yeah, tell us.
There was a strip club that everybody went to, and they found some of the strippers, and they did body scans of them for some of the characters.
Nice. Nice. Perfect.
That's the way to do it. That's the way to do it. So that's cool. So you're working on that, and then you got back into the comic field.
No, then I went into the comic field. I was never in. I had done a little writing here and there on small things. I had actually got involved with Jimmy again, working on the Creative Universe card set that Nick Barucci did way back when for Dynamic Forces in the day, and did a little things here and there, but nothing that was anything really substantial. Mostly writing on the sidelines. I had worked in publicity, so I had done some articles for them and things like that. Mm-hmm. So once I get involved with DC, then it's off to the races, and and it's there's a learning curve that takes place, and I always use the story that when I get there, I always appreciated Jim Lee more than anything else, and one of the reasons I say that is I took on the job, and you're still learning on the job, so you make a lot of mistakes along the way, but as I'm making the mistakes, we release Hush, Batman Hush. And that book hit so hard and so well that ultimately everything else that we were doing wrong, nobody noticed.
Yeah.
So it was getting all this high attention. So we're fixing things. And by the time Hush winds down, we got a plan in place in order to really launch the line. And what I used to do, and I still have them, which is funny because you see all these files you find and kept. I used to present to Paul every year a game plan, like an overarching sensibility of what the series and what the line was going to happen and how things were going to tie in and what the big moments are and everything. And I would pitch the entire DC universe for a year of what we're going to do. And I built that by talking to the different writers and different editors and hearing what everyone's going to do. And we built this giant document. I'd send it to Paul. He said, this is good, this is bad, this is good, this is bad, whatever. But ultimately it became the blueprint for the year. So when Hush ends, that winds down, and all of a sudden, Jeff Johns launches Green Lantern, and we got Teen Titans, and then we have Loeb and McGinnis on Superman, Batman. All of a sudden, we got some hits coming, and then you feel yourself cooking with gas, and you're starting to get a little more confidence. And as we're getting more confidence, these books are starting to take off, and then the big plan kicks in with things like Identity Crisis, and then Countdown to Infinite Crisis, then into Infinite Crisis, and it's probably the most creative moment in time for me working at DC. I would say honestly, from Identity Crisis to probably the end of the 52 weekly series, that is what I would call my sweet spot. It's like when everything was working to the best of its ability.
Now, Dan, would you guys have you hear about this? Working for a big company, you have this amazing stable of artists and writers. A lot of clashing personalities, right? I mean, they're all individuals, they're all creatives. Do you somehow? Do you guys do a retreat and then you guys get together and maybe spitball what's the plan, or when you lay out a plan that you would go to Paul Levitz and present it to him, there's got to be a lot of work goes into that, right?
Yeah. I mean, listen, when we first did it, I was working with Jeff and Greg Rucka and Judd Winnick, and the reason why I did those three guys were. Between the three of them, they were working on about, I would say, honestly, somewhere between 11 to 13 books between the three of them. That's how much work they were taking on. And they were all primary characters within the DCU. So when you did that, and you had the characters and the primary characters all covered, I could sort of circumvent some of the problems because those guys were working together, and they were working together. And they were working behind the scenes, so to speak. So they weren't really working through the editors; they were working beneath the editors. And they were working in conjunction with the other, which is the best way for them. When the talent works together, it's a lot better than people trying to force things down into the books. But if they're all invested in it, then you get a much better product at the end of the day. And that's what we did. We got better product at the end of the day because of that.
Mm-hmm. Now with the New 52 and everything, that series stuff, and I thought with Batman, Greg Capullo, Scott Snyder, I think crushed it, with the Batman and everything. Now that was a revamping, kind of like the beginning of DC again. What were you guys doing with the New 52?
Well, it's a lot of things converging at the same time. We had a change in management, first of all. So that was the first thing that was taking place. Second thing was there was a big drop in the market big drop. So Jim and I come in as co-publishers. You move into the co-publisher spot, and all of a sudden, the first thing you see is the market tanking. And that's not what you want to do. And we knew we had to do something dramatic. I had tried to do a relaunch of the line about 3 times. It got shut down every time I did. Sometimes in a rather severe way over the years. And that idea was always there, about having to start. And it started with a simple line, which is one of the things we need to do is unmarry, Clark and Lois. We wanted to get them unmarried. But we had to figure out a way to do it that was going to be not too controversial. And lo and behold, we create New 52. So go figure. But anyway, but it was a way to try to. That was the start of the story, and then ultimately it's like, why stop there? Why don't we try to find ways to fix and change? And we started to really spend a lot of time trying to revamp the sensibilities of the characters for a more contemporary setting. Because you got to remember, at that point, these characters are 70 years old, 75 years old. I mean, the ideals that created those characters at that point have changed. And you got to update with the times. You just got to move. And we did a lot of changes. And like I said, people came to me and said, things like Green Lantern and Batman didn't change as much as so many other books did. And that's primarily because the books were selling really well. And there was that cold feet moment, like, we can't change things that are working too, can we? Because if we do and they don't work, then we're really screwed. So you're trying to hedge your bets, but for the most part, there was a lot of great new invention taking place in those books at the time. And I think that was a creative energy that was good because it tried to open the sensibilities. When New 52 goes bad, it's primarily because most people just go back to the old well and start to wallow in nostalgia again and starting to bring the nostalgia forward without really reinventing it in a way that felt fresh, just felt something different. And once you have just something different, then you go, well, we should just go back to the main thing because now it's the wheels are coming off the cart,
Yeah. And Dan, when you'd mentioned that the Lois and Clark being married, and especially the time when they did get married, not dissimilar from when Peter Parker and Mary Jane got married. Do you think that was a gimmick, and then they sort of painted himself in a corner because of it?
Listen, everything they do in comics is a gimmick. Let's be honest. There's a base sensibility, there's a base understanding, and it goes back to Paul. One of the things he first said to me way back when was, he goes, "You can play with the toys as much you want. You can do as much you want to them, but all I ask you is when you're finished, put them back the way you found them." And that's sort of the sensibilities of a lot of these places is keep on working them. And then when they're kind of worn down or kind of, then put them back where they are and restart them and then move them back forward again. And that's the reinvention that constantly takes place. You're always trying to find a way to tell the same story differently, regardless of how much you think you're reinventing the wheel.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Now, so we go through New 52, other series. I was actually quite a fan of the stuff that came out of New 52. I know you had a big hand, with Harley Quinn and all that stuff as well, as Jimmy mentioned.
But let me tell you this, you have to hear the Harley Quinn story because it's actually a fun one. So the Harley Quinn story is this. We were doing a retailer show, and this is true. We're doing a retailer show in Orlando, and because Jimmy's living in Florida, he says he's going to come meet me and hang out with us. This is great. So we're at the show, and literally I'm talking to the retailers, and I was saying something like, I think the expression I said is that I think, I wish that DC had its Deadpool. Deadpool was rocking it at the time. And I said, I wish we had that character that had those crane sensibilities. And the retailer says to me, he goes, well, you have that character. And I said, who's that? He goes, Harley Quinn. And I said, Harley Quinn? And I looked at him and I'm like, really? And he goes, yeah, that's your crazy character. Because in DC, it was always Lobo or Ambush Bug. That was the crazy characters. And for me, when I first got to DC, Harley Quinn was a very dark and heavy book, and it didn't have much life to it. So that's why when the Harley Quinn that I knew was the one that DC was publishing when I first got there. So Jimmy's standing next to me, and I said, "How much do you know about Harley Quinn?" He goes, "I think I can make it work. I think I can do something with Amanda." I said, "Okay, you guys figure it out." And literally, that's how it started. So he goes off with Amanda, and boom, son of a gun! If that thing doesn't take off when it hit, but it hits the ground hard.
So did he pick? So you offer him? Can you do something with Harley Quinn? Is almost like, well, let's take a chance. Let's make a new series. right? And
Well,
then
but that's the fun part of the job, because the reality is, we have to put out a certain number of books, and you have to understand that there's books that are expected to work, and then there's books that have no chance in hell but are worth taking a shot on, and you got to keep constantly trying and pushing and being innovative, or else you're just going to constantly just be custodial in your job. You're just going to have to, just make sure everything's working properly and just keep the wheels oiled. And I was much more of a chaos maker in some ways. So it's much more about challenging it and see what we could do and pushing the limits. The things that I get most excited about are not about Superman and Batman or Justice League. It's about when we do the Hanna-Barbera crossovers or the Looney Tunes comics, or all the crazy little corners of the DC universe that you play. That was the fun stuff, because there's no expectation for that to work. So when it does work, holy shit, it's like you're super excited because you caught this weird little lightning in a bottle. And Harley Quinn was not just a lightning in a bottle, it was an entire storm,
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, if I may ask, and then there came a point where social media started blasting, and there was reports that you were no longer with DC. And,
that
our mouths dropped.
That happened a couple of times. To be honest, it times it out with levels of frustration for me. And it probably, it probably leaks off you and people read it as certain things. Or the fact that I was out there interviewing might have had something to do with it. But the truth is, there was a couple of spots. I think it was around 2008, 2009. I was worn down around then. We came off of all the big events. We were trying to push more events. And I just wasn't enjoying it anymore, to be honest with you. And I was looking around, and I had a big interview with a company back in animation. I was trying to get back to animation, and the story goes. I was at a convention, and I was being treated like dead man walking at a convention one time.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah. Like nobody wanted to talk to me because the word was out that I was getting fired. And there was all this rumors around me and shit like that. And it was what was it? One of the Nikki Fink or something like that. Hey, how are ya?
How are you, Dan?
Well, thanks. Leilani's sitting here too, so she's listening in.
Leilani, how are you, my love?
She's gonna,
Where's my chica?
She's coming in. Hold on. Let me finish the story.
We're talking comic books.
There she is.
But anyway, what happened was, the true story is that, so I went, I had a really bad weekend. So I go back to the office and I go sit down with Paul. I sit in his office. I said, so.
Hi, Jimmy.
Yeah. So I sit down with Paul and I go, hey, rumor has it, you're out there, looking for people to replace me. So I figured I should probably hear about it directly from you if that's the case. And he stops, he puts his pen down, as you always do, and he leaned back in his chair and he goes, you know what? I would try to find somebody to replace you if I can find somebody stupid enough to take the job. No, you're fine. Don't worry about this shit. He goes like that, just like that, like blows it all off. And I'm like, okay, I'm good. So the funny part is that all this actually renewed me. It actually got me fired up, and I'm like, okay, if you're going to make your exit, you're going to make it your way. So the fun part was I got a second wind on that. And that gets us into, then we start pushing into Blackest Night, and we're trying to push out other stuff going on there too. So, good things come from everything. It's what you make.
That's when you gave me my opportunity. So thank you.
Exactly,
I had a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Because I can only imagine, like you said, it's easy when you have a big corporation and you're publishing so many books a month that your mistakes can get hidden by the successes.
Mm-hmm.
But man, then you went through a string of huge successes, but the pressure must be unbelievable, especially that it's a publicly traded company, right? I can imagine what your emails must look like on any given morning.
Yeah, no, it's when you say it's a publicly traded company, that's one thing. But it's one thing when you make a profit number and then you said, okay, up at 20%, every time you do it. And one of the mistakes we did do was after we had such success with 52 and Infinite Crisis, that ultimately when that was ending, they're like, what's waiting for us here? So we had to jumpstart so much else. And we had to push up the start for Countdown to Final Crisis, which probably needed more time. We wanted to give them some breathing space, but instead they buttressed against each other. And that put a lot of pressure on the studio, put a lot of pressure on the talent. Things that were supposed to be better organized start to come off a little bit, but everybody soldiered through, and I still enjoy reading that material,
Yeah.
But again, that stuff wound up coming out probably a year before it should have.
Because then you're rushing, like you said about the talent, you're rushing the books, and
if you look at anything right now, even now, I mean, you see events after event after event, and the problem with that is the events don't take hold. An event's got it. Once an event happens, world changes and everything goes different. You need time to show those changes on how they exist. You need time for them to settle in and become the new status quo. If it doesn't become the status quo and you change it right away, then the event becomes superfluous because you just changed nothing for the thing that's about to change nothing, that's about to change nothing. And so when the events line up like trains on a track, there's no value. They only get judged against each other for what they are at the moment, rather than really affecting real appreciable change on a line and having a lasting value with it. That's why Crisis people remember so well, because they had Crisis and it took 20 years before anybody got to changing anything about it. So the changes they made sense and they held. And
now,
that's what you need to do. But
now, is this true? You have your old pal Ethan Van Sky, but Final Crisis, a Flash Rebirth's lunch a little bit.
Well, what happened was that it all started to rush into each other, and ultimately when Final Crisis moves up, it goes, instead of being supportive of events, it's becoming contradictory, or competitive to them, and ultimately it becomes harder because you have so many things happening at once, and especially when you're working at different speeds. If you're working with artists that work at a slower pace, you have to start that earlier. And things of that nature, you got to move it around. I mean, one of the great stories for the original 52 weekly series was that the original plan for the 52 weekly series was it was supposed to fill in the missing year for the 1 year later jump. We did this 1 year later jump. All the stories were supposed to change, but lo and behold, when they sat down to write that story, they looked at all the changes that took place on the series, and they said, "We don't have a story. There's nothing for us to say here." And you went back and looked, and you see the changes. Some of them were good, and some of them were very superficial. So therefore, they had to take a story on their own, and push it forward. And there's this great moment. The pivot moment in 52 weekly series is when they had this storyline with the giant hawk girl. This giant hawk girl appears, and I look at that and I go, we have no reference to that anywhere in the 1 year later jump. Never mentioned it, never discussed it. So you have to make a decision right there. Do we go with that story as these writers are telling it and let them tell their story in 52 as it exists? Or do you change it to something that is not going to work, but at least it's consistent with everything else? And my choice was let them tell their story. And as I said to everybody, I said, we'll figure it out at the end. And we sort of did and we sort of didn't. But at the end of the day, the 52 weekly series was a success. And that's what matters most.
Now, Jimmy brought up something kind of. So the company has no real focus right now, other than a lot of Batman books.
Yeah, I mean, I had a rule: no more than 33% Batman. You couldn't, if we weren't allowed to present, the line couldn't be more than 33% Batman. That was the rule. Because the problem is, if you create a stool and it only has 2 legs, and you cut off one of the legs, you're falling on your ass. And people forget. Because it's been so successful so long. But Batman from the mid 60s up until the mid 80s for 20 years was a middling book.
Yeah.
Number 40 seller. It wasn't making any sort of waves. It was one of those things they had to keep on trying to figure out. And it's not until Frank Miller does Dark Knight that Batman is cool again. And Dark Knight gives you the Batman movie. And then all of a sudden they're off to the races. And now he's the success he is. But between the mid 60s to the mid 80s, Robin sold better than Batman, and that's just the way it works. So, I mean, the reality is it's great that it works, but you should never take anything for granted always, because fortunes can change. And you go back to the 60s, Batman was the top of the world with the Adam West series, and boy, did that fall out really fast. So, who knows? One bad thing could change the world, So if you want to build sustainability in a company, you got to make sure you have a wide diversity of product to make sure the company's stable, And that's why we're always trying different things.
Now, before we jump, go ahead, Billy. Sorry.
Yeah, same thing. Before we jump into why we're here to talk about Frank Miller Presents and your new endeavors, you had an amazing stable of creatives working for you, including a few, and then I didn't hear like Ethan Van Sciver
Yeah.
and Jimmy Palmiotti. Is there anything? I mean, I know you had a great run. You did it for a long time, an exhausting run, apparently. Is there anything that you really wanted to do that you never got a chance to do?
Yeah.
Like there was that one, like, I mean, Wednesday Comics was fantastic. He did a lot of great things, Jimmy's that I love the Hex series, those one and done issues.
Yeah.
I got an opportunity to work on. But what is that one thing like?
Yeah. It's over.
Does it hurt? Oh, is it too painful?
That's one of the reasons why I wanted to get out in 2008. I wasn't able to do it. So
yeah. Now, before we jump into Frank Miller, I just kind of table off of what Jimmy was saying. I mean, there's been so much in the last maybe year and a half or so or longer. A lot of stuff that DC has been pushing out has been causing quite controversy, with a lot of fans firing back, not liking what they're doing. And then, the creators firing back. Some say that they're insulting fans or whatnot. Do you have an opinion even on the state of, let's say, the mainstream comics in general and what they're putting out there?
Listen, it's that actually gets me into Frank Miller Presents in a good way. Probably one of my issues is right now is, let's see, what's a nice way to put it. I don't know how much people are enjoying comics, in its own way. And it's hard for me to say that, there's a certain joy that comes with comics for me. And I think it's one of the reasons why nostalgia plays so big in comics is because it brings you back to a place that you really remember and have these fond memories of. It's funny. I was in the comic shop today and I was laughing at so many homage covers from every company, just constantly harkening back to books from the 70s and 80s like they came out last week. And I talked to the guy at the store and he said, yeah, those are the things that sell best. Yeah. And so they're not buying the books because they're enjoying what they're reading. They're enjoying it because of the memories that those books invoke. And that's a shame. That's a shame. People should enjoy the spirits, and it's hard to say what's right and what's wrong about content other than it's got to be good. I mean, this is what started Frank Miller Presents, is me and Frank talking about craft, and we started talking about craft, about what's missing in comics. And and we talk about collaboration and about building things together. He talks about working in a studio with other artists and competing to improve themselves. Not everybody just locked up in their own vision or their own sensibilities or their own brand. And it's also about storytelling. What makes a story well? How do you build character correctly? How do you build story correctly? And a lot of stuff is just running on muscle right now, muscle memory. People take shortcuts in storytelling because we all have such an ingrained knowledge of these characters. We impose those character traits that we know so well on the characters that we read, even if it's not in the book. And that makes for lazy writing, lazy storytelling, and things of that nature, and that's why I applaud a lot of the creators that are out there pushing their own material, because if to make a book work from ground up with a new idea is extraordinarily difficult. To find that audience is the hardest thing we're going to find. We're starting to see that ourselves. And the reality is, if you're able to accomplish that goal, then you've done your job as a creator. You've been able to connect with an audience in a great way. But to just take pre-existing material and just keep on pushing it out because there's an audience that's following it so intently that they're looking past the weaknesses just to be able to absorb it, but not enjoying it. I don't think that's a win for anybody. I don't. Yeah. I think we got to try harder at making comics.
Yeah. I think they're becoming more aware of that. That's why the numbers going down. But you mentioned something.
And I hope I'm not out of line saying this, but I'm going to say it anyway. Dan, I'm listening to you, and I've known you for a lot of years, and you are like a different person.
Oh,
yes. And you were when you were with Ethan. You were so just stressed is the only word. I'm sure my little girl Leilani and being married might have a little something to do with it. But you are so much more calm and centered, and I love this you.
No, it's funny. I'm one of the few people who can say that the 2 years of COVID were better than the 2 years that preceded it.
You really, to you, great. It's nice to see you happy.
Yeah, you know what?
I'm not overly stressed.
I'm having a lot of fun. I'm working with great people, and the great part about working in a smaller company, which you get, you know, one of the great things about working in a smaller company is you get to work with people you like, you know, and people you enjoy the company and want to be there and share common goals and share common interests and really want to be part of the process. And the people that Frank and I are working with, they're just wonderful. I mean, really great. I mean, I'm working with.
Oh wait, you're working with Frank Miller? What are you guys working on?
Oh. Well,
what's Frank Miller? What is that?
Yeah, there we are. You know what? We're having a lot of fun. Our first 2 books are about to drop. We just locked them out. They're coming out on November 23rd, day before Thanksgiving, which is Frank's follow-up to his Ronin series, Ronin Book 2, which is exciting for him and exciting for us. This is a story he wanted to tell since the conclusion of the very first Ronin, which is pretty exciting. And I'm working on Ancient Enemies, which is a new character series that I just created. And I'm working with Danilo Beirut, this incredible, talented artist from Brazil, and just a fabulous storyteller. I think what I really love is just the way both Frank and also Danilo both approach their storytelling, and it's just fun. I'm just having it's a good time, and you know, it's weird to start from scratch because it really challenges you as a writer. Something that I haven't really felt, honestly, since my days at Mainframe working on ReBoot and on War Planets. So I'm having a good time with this, which is exactly what I needed coming out of DC, you know.
Yeah, that's it looks incredible, and I obviously I picked up the ash can, which you know, if you want to try to get it now, it's a lot more than $1. But Philip Tan, by the way, is that guy is gonna really start blowing up. I mean, he is fantastic.
We'll make him go full screen.
Yeah, what they're doing is everything's like a double page spread. I mean, it's Philip's. I'm gonna show some. I gotta show off some stuff. Look at this. Look how beautiful.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
I mean, he's just taking his game up 17 levels working with Frank, and they're having a blast. And what's even more fun, this is the good part, is that Frank looks at Philip's art, and Frank goes, "I got to take my game up a notch," you know. Right. And so they're feeding. You watch this happening, and you know, I used to see this with some of the artists back in the DC days, where you see these guys challenging each other, and it's just really fun to be part of that and just be the fly on the window watching in going, oh God damn, you know, because I'm looking at the pages coming in. I've worked with Philip now 15 plus years, and I'm telling you right now, this is the best work of his career, honestly.
Yeah, I was actually first exposed to him when Last Shadowhawk. Him and Brian Haberlin, you know, approached Jim about that, and he was like, "Yeah, you know what? Go for it. Let's do it." And when I saw his artwork, I was like, "Holy smokes!" Of course, I had to follow him on every social media handle there was, and then I'm like diving into this guy's work, and I'm like, "Dude, this guy's amazing."
Just don't ever get into a text war with him. He loves to text.
Machine gun text?
I'm trying to work, and these texts are coming. They're like about a mile long, and I'm sitting there going, "Guys, I got 63-year-old eyes. I can't be reading this shit."
So Dan, how did this come together with the Frank Miller Presents? I mean, it seems like pretty quick that you guys, I mean, unless you've been secretly working on this together for a couple of years and all, but you know, all the boom, the ash can is announced. You know
what? I wouldn't say secretly working on it, but we've been talking about it for a while. We've been working on it for a while. And realistically, it's funny. I think it's turning into the Joker origin. Every time we tell a story, we tell it a little differently. So I'm not even sure what really happened anymore. But I believe that we were talking on a couple of projects, and Frank was asking me if I wanted to edit for him on a DC book, and I'm like, yeah, that's not going to work. I said, but if you get the rights back to Ronin, maybe we can pull something together. And he talked about bringing it to other publishers, and I said, listen, you don't need me if you go to other publishers. But if you want to do that, that's great. I'll help you navigate it. I said, but if you really want to do something crazy, let's start our own company. And it's like really silly when you think about it. I said, that's a kind of fun, thing to do, something different. Neither one of us has done it. And for Frank, it's really more interesting for him than for me because, he rails on publishers. He makes publishers' life miserable. And now he's stepping into that seat. So, you can't become what you've been fighting against. So you have to really approach it with a different dynamic. And that's what makes it really fascinating working with him on this, because he's approaching it just from the creator's point of view. And I'm like, you got to, now you're coming from the business point of view, and we come up in the middle on how we can pull this all together,
Yeah.
My Phantom Stranger, I had a great time writing. I have like this couple of things that I've wrote for DC, and the good part is I write the characters that nobody else wants to do, and that's the best part. So I get to do Phantom Stranger, I do Metalman, I do Omac. That makes me happy, because it's so weird. And you get to have fun with it. Yeah.
Now with self-publishing and everything now, I mean, as you're well aware with, a lot of independent creators now really taking the, just an average Joe, someone who had an idea now goes to Kickstarter, goes to Indiegogo, goes to Zoop or any of these other platforms. Now, what I'm seeing, and, Top Cow is one that does this. Have you guys considered, like with your premieres, then your books, like we're going to crowdfund this book. This is the special edition. You get crowdfunding, and then you go into your regular distribution.
It's interesting you say that because we raised some capital at the early stages with a company that was interested in doing NFTs with our material, and that was helpful because that money was the startup money for us, which allowed us to go ahead and publish. But truth be told, we're both a little old school in our what we like and what we want to do, and we both agree we want to be in print. We don't even have a digital deal in place for this yet because ultimately the way the comics are being created, I showed you, Ronin's very weird because everything's a double page spread. Even though it might have multiple panels, it's built as a double page spread. That's not going to look good on a computer screen. Just not going to look good, and we want to go with the format that is best for the material. And since this material is being created for print, we're staying in print. If we wanted to do digital, we would approach the style of storytelling differently that works better for the digital market. Because ultimately, we've all been pushed into a corner where one size fits all, and one size doesn't fit all. There's a different reading attitude, sensibility, process that goes in a print book versus a collection versus a digital webtoon.
Yeah, web comic or something. Yeah.
Comic. It's all different, and you really got to work to your medium. So right now we've agreed that print is our medium. And once we have that, we've got to be successful in the medium we chose before we go out anywhere else.
Well, you would be distributing print with crowdfunding.
It is. I still believe in this system that is in place. I think it still needs improvement. I think it needs a shot of adrenaline, honestly. But I think when you have something as strong as a distribution system that pushes out in 2,500, 2,600 locations or some number like that around the country, we should take advantage of that. Because what is comics? Comics is based, you said crowdfunding is great, but comics is based on community and people talking and mixing and having it. I think that's one of the reasons why you've seen this massive resurgence in conventions is people have this inherent need to be part of something, and comics bring us together. That's what it always was. I don't know Jimmy Palmiotti if there wasn't the comic shop, or because we meet it there. You know what I mean? And there's fun stuff like that that you come out.
You want to bring like to revitalize that classic. Comic shop where where you go in and it's like Cheers. You go into your local comic shop and everyone's like, "Hey, Dan, how's it going?" And bring that part of the comic community back because a lot of that I think is lost. It's lost now. You can't go anywhere.
It's
besides
funny
the comic shop.
I just did the keynote speech at the Diamond Retailer Summit this weekend, and I stated something that was misunderstood in some places, but I want to repeat it again. I said, we will have to understand in comics, we lost a generation or two of fans. We have the older guys that have been reading it. We have certain groups that have been reading it, but there's a crowd somewhere between 15 and 25 that have no interest in comics.
And Dan, why do you think that is? If you have a film that makes $1 billion, why can't those books that you have, a Batman book is selling 40,000 copies?
I think quite honestly is that scratched that itch, that serviced the need for that type of storytelling. The problem is when we were reading comics, when we first started reading, there's no graphic novels. So you have to buy the new stuff because there's no old stuff. You go unless you're buying old ones. You have one or two TV shows that are awful at the time. And that's about it. Now you can't turn on a TV without bumping into something superhero related or comic book related anywhere. So if you really want a superhero fix and the book doesn't service that need or answer that story need, boom, you're out there. And you're gonna get it from TV and movies. And where do you go? You go to other types of medium to get those types of storytelling, that more continuous storytelling. Also, let's be honest, guys, for DC and Marvel, who've been the leaders for so long, and that makes me culpable, by the way, on what I'm about to say. The stuff is extraordinarily complex, convoluted, and impenetrable in places. And everything is derivative of pre-existing stories. And now we're doing multiple interpretations of the same character to be even more confusing, that the only people who can understand what's going on are the people who have been reading it for the last 40 years. And ultimately, that's the only one's going to get that satisfaction out of that story when you're doing derivative characters or something without any explanation of even the origin points of these characters. So when you have something that impenetrable, and all of a sudden a movie hits the screen, and in 2 hours I get that satisfying experience of a superhero story, why would I want to read a comic book? I don't know.
Especially kids today, they're not really reading, unfortunately.
Well, you have video games. You've got. I mean, everything's on a screen now. I mean, it's.
And I challenge that question about whether or not kids are reading.
Yeah.
I think
they read manga.
Manga. Let's be honest, guys. It's a form of storytelling that they've gravitated to, and there's a depth of character. There's a complexity of the storylines. There's an urgency. There's an energy on a page that might not be found in some books at the time. So we have to just identify what those audiences are. So you have a choice now. And I said this, you have a choice. We can deeply ingrain ourselves into the people who are longtime readers, and just constantly feed into that nostalgia feed and milk it for as long as we can and collect against that if we can. Or we could go after the very young audience that's about to come up, the ones that are watching these movies and TV shows, and they might want to see more because they haven't been exposed to everything for years. And then they might be able to gravitate to something, but you got to present them something new and something unique that is theirs. And you need, and I used to use this joke, but it's not a joke. I don't want my dad's superheroes. I want my superheroes. I want my version. I want my characters. I want my thing. How many kids there? I know parents, and I'm a parent myself. You really want your kid to like what you like, but you know how that turns out in the end every time.
Yeah.
They like it at the start, and then they break off and they find their own version and direction. And that's just the way the world works. The kids as kids are growing up, they're establishing their own tastes, their own niches, and their own independence. And their independence comes from finding things on their own that they can embrace on their own. And the last thing they want is dad stuff or mom stuff.
Well, and I got to tell you, we're venturing back into the direct market in December, right? With our first omnibus, and then in May, I think we come back because we crowdfund first. That's what we did. Boom's done it. Jimmy's done it. Ethan's done it. A couple of people in there that chat's going by. I don't see it so much. But I think can give the direct market a kick in the ass, a good kick in the pants, and retailers would be something like Frank Miller Presents, something fresh that Frank Miller's back and he's dealing directly. It's coming directly from him, from you, from Philip. I mean, it needs a fresh thing.
And to tailor off that.
It's weird. It's honestly, Ancient Enemies is very weird because Ancient Enemies is probably going to be one of the most traditional comics on a stand. It's going to be.
Well, what's Ancient Enemies about, Dan?
It's an interesting story. It's an idea that I had floating back in the days of DC, that when I was looking at an ultimate version of DC Universe, but ultimately I moved away from that. And I'm interested in institutionalized hatred, believe it or not. People, there's a natural aggression to people without any explanation. They just immediately hate. And ultimately it takes place in a world, two different worlds that have been competing for millennium. And then ultimately the fight comes to Earth, and their hatred gets transferred onto other people, and people wind up fighting without understanding why. And it gives an examination of what they are. And this is, I'm going to go into this in a second too. And for me, it's a fun story because I got a chance to create a bunch of new characters. And that's just the backdrop. It's the characters that inhabit that world that are interesting to me and taking off. And I'm having a lot of fun with it. And there's 4 primary lead groups in the story. One is the genie, which is basically a representative on our Earth for one of the alien races. There's another character called the First Responder, who is also a representative for the competing race. And then in between, there's an organization called the Greater Good that you have to wonder what their motivations are, even though they seem like they're out there to help everyone. As I always say, the Greater Good is an interpretation because everybody is trying to do the greater good, but what it is what's important to that person. So again, who are they, what they stand for is a big issue. And then I have a mother-son superhero team called the Wraith and Son, which I'm having the most fun with, because it really is a mother and son superhero team where the son thinks he establishes himself, and there's this wonderful dynamic between the two of them as they try to figure out their superhero and their own personal relationship along the way. But the idea is that the story is that an alien ship crashes on Earth, and destroys basically the Eastern Seaboard. And in the rebuilding process, you start to find out the separation of class of people within the United States, and that class war starts to play out against the war that the aliens bring to Earth too. And all these things start to layer on top of each other as it goes forward.
Oh, cool! And you own it all; it's all yours.
Yeah, actually, it's a Frank Miller Presents project. So the company has it. Yeah, we're having fun. Like I said, and Frank and I have a commitment to both commit one original project to the company per year. Frank's project, he's actually brought in created a character called Pandora, which is a young adult fantasy. We have Emma Cubitt on the art on that, and she's done a brilliant job on it. And that's what's been great about Frank Miller Presents, is that we're not in a box. Ronin is this high-end science fiction, action, samurai, manga style book. Ancient Enemies is a science fiction superhero storytelling. And then we have this high-end fantasy young adult story with Pandora. So you have these different flavors all under the same umbrella. And the umbrella is how, if you look at Frank's work over the years, it is very diverse in its style and sensibilities, everything from Martha Washington to Sin City,
Sure.
So because of that, we wanted to bring that same sense of energy to Frank Miller Presents. And the first 3 books were essential in getting that point across. And I think we did a good job at it.
And what's your schedule? What's the publishing schedule?
Every
Are
book
they
is
monthlies or
bi-monthly. We're
Bi-monthly,
we're 48-page books, although the first issue of Ronin is 56 pages. First issue of Ancient Enemies is 64 pages. So we wanted to go big books at the start to get people's attention. But there'll be 48-page books on a bi-monthly schedule. I want to have them time for people to find it, because it's only 2 books or 3 books, so it might get lost on a very crowded shelf. So we got to make sure they stand out. But you put up that cover before. I said this at the retailer conference. I got to say this again. There's a certain rush that you get in comics. You know this, Billy, creating certain things and seeing different things happen. And this is a character in the center is a character called Mr. Gruntle, who's a part of the Greater Good team. And that's a story beat actually in the issue. And Frank turned in the cover, and I stared at it, and I thought to myself, Frank Miller is drawing a character that I created.
Yeah.
yeah.
That's awesome.
And this is a guy that has only been drawing his own stuff for so long, or Marvel and DC, but he rarely strays out of that area. And to draw a character I created, and I see that on, it's that's worth everything to me. When you do so much over the years and everything starts to blur into each other, there are certain moments that stands out, and I have to say that's a moment that stands out for me. It's like I could say that Frank Miller drew a character I wrote, and it's like, wow, that's kind of cool, So but the fun part is Frank's been I don't know, man. We have a really good relationship. We get along really well. It's just, It's really, people point to us and is that an act? I said, no, I don't think so. I hope not. But we get along really good, and it's a lot of, I just enjoy, we just sit, we get together, we sit and we talk about comics, and we enjoy the stuff that we like. We enjoy the silly stuff about comics. And in the process, in the conversation, stories bubble to the top. And I have to say, this is the closest thing to the Mainframe experience that I've had in working in such a long time, because Mainframe was the same exact way. We used to sit in a room and we used to just talk, and then all of a sudden you got this chain of thought, and all of a sudden the thought becomes an idea, the idea becomes a story, the story becomes a script, and then it becomes an animation. And that's sort of here now. It's a conversation, it's a joke. We made fun of the geek, and now all of a sudden I've got a geek character in my Ancient Enemies book that Frank designed. So that's the way this shit works, which is fun.
And what's your staff like? Your crew, like who? I mean, you got.
Oh, I have nothing but a crack team. I've got me, and I've got my as I like to say, my managing editor. I call it my managing editor. I got Leilani, and we run it from the house. We literally do that, and everybody else we just hire out what we need. But we're doing it all. I'm writing solicitation copy. Leilani's hunting down barcodes.
Yes, yeah, man. Now you're part of Outlaw Comics, man. This is it.
Promising invoices. And let me say, if there's any ex-DC employees listening in, thank you for all the work you did. I miss you all. I wish you were all doing your work right now, because Jesus, this is a lot of work. And you never really fully appreciate the level of effort that's being done on a daily basis by people who make it look effortless. And wow, I miss them. Nothing quite like having 160 people behind you and then getting it down to 2.
Yeah. Hey, but you're making it work though, right?
Yeah, we're having fun. And listen, Frank's on top of everything. Frank's our creative lead, and he is literally going over scripts, reviewing art, designs, and he's putting guys to task. I have to say, which is interesting, because even Ronin, we started Ronin. There was pages that we had to throw out, and then him and Philip really sat down, and then he started laying it out. And I have to say, the funny part about it is that Frank's layouts, we could have went with. We could publish them. He spends basically, because Philip's art was so good, he started making the layouts look better. And I'm like, you got to stop this. I'm having competing books here, but it's wonderful because it's part of the process, because people are excited. And when people are excited, that energy makes it to the page, and hopefully it gets it to the people who read it in the hands. Once they get a book in the hands, they get it in the hands, they get excited too. But you wouldn't be living otherwise,
Yeah, and I was actually going to kind of touch base on this. Jasper Plan 9 asks, question for Dan: will any creators that are doing Big 2 get invited, like a gentleman like Grant Morrison?
You know what? It's funny. I saw Grant recently when he was doing his book tour. And I love Grant immensely. He's just the level of talent and ideas that come off that guy is endless. But I've been watching him on his book tour. I know he's really anxious on the books and pushing out the book right now. And for us, we're starting small. We want to grow ultimately, but if we start going out there and grabbing other people and bringing them in without having a base, we got to build a foundation. I got to build a foundation on what Frank Miller is, Frank Miller Presents, ourselves, to make sure that we have the competencies to deliver product that people are excited about. And once we have that base built, then you feel more comfortable bringing other creators in. But there's no rush here to expand the line out too quickly, because ultimately we don't have that luxury of putting out 20 books with the hope that 2 succeed or 3 succeed. We got to make sure that each one lands properly. So all the energy, and like I said, 2 people. So right now we're going to concentrate on what we have. We do have a schedule laid out for the next couple of years of what we're planning to do. But right now we're looking at 2 books per month, 2 issues per month, and holding at that for a while until we feel confident enough to be able to expand out and actually bring more help in there.
So you're doing bi-monthly, but both book issues going to come out the same month.
Well, what I decided is I wanted to launch the first 2 books on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, primarily because I wanted to have a presence on the shelf, not just 1 book, but 2, and also to be on the shelf right before the holiday weekend. So if anybody decides to have turkey and comics, this is the comic that they can have with their turkey. Also people shop on Black Friday, blah, blah, blah. There's just this weird shopping weekend that takes place. I wanted to have a presence on the shelves. Emma's book and the Pandora comes out 2 weeks later. And then we'll have those 3 books will be out, and that'll be our total output for this year. And then you'll see 2 books per month. And we have other things coming out. Frank's working on a Western version of Sid City called Blood and Dust, which is basically the loose origin of Basin City, which is kind of interesting. And that's idea is coming together. He has a one-shot he's working on with Mila Manera that'll come out later next year as well. So that's good. I have a couple of one-shots built in around the characters around Ancient Enemies, but they're smaller books, $3.99, 24 pages instead. And I this is where Frank humors me. And I'm going to do a book with Svengoolie from MeTV.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Mainly because I became friends with Sven when we did the DC crossover. MeTV was looking to do Sven comics. So I said, I have to do them. I don't want anybody else doing it but me. But I got some great creators involved. I've got be talking with Artin Franco, Jill Thompson, Christopher Jones, and we're looking to bring some fun guys in to do covers on that. And we'll have some fun on that one. And the best part is we'll get some coverage on the Me TV. So hopefully get some awareness with that, because we want to make sure we're out there and people are seeing and hearing about who we are and what we're doing.
That's great. That's great. Now, if you don't mind me asking, I mean, what is your guys' kind of marketing strategy? Are you going to be getting video promos done of your books, like the trailers that some publishers do? How do you guys pound?
Yeah, we're pretty much a guerrilla operation right now, and my barcode team that also manages finance also does social media for the company.
Dan, now you got to realize when the writing department's working, the editorial department's not working.
Yeah,
and editorial department's working. The marketing department's not working.
Oh, trust me, the marketing department has to take a break to do solicitation pages. And
Yeah.
I've been actually trying to put a lot of work into solicitation pages. I actually put a Frank Miller page called Under the Hat, which is all background on what's happening inside the company in there.
Very cool.
We're doing what's called What's What pages that give breakdowns of our characters to give you backstory on who the characters are. I'm doing creator bios on it too for some of the people you might not know who are working on our books, putting creator bios in the previews copy, and then all that material moves on site as well. So you'll be able to find that on the frankmillerpresents.com website, as well as being pushed out through our Instagram and other social media sites too.
Yeah. Now, I've seen this come up so many times in the chat as it's scrolling through, and a lot of people are asking it, is Frank considering doing a Sin City Western?
Yeah, that's what I said before. Yeah, it's called Blood.
Oh,
and
you
Dust.
did mention it. Okay.
Yeah. That's the Blood and Dust book, and that's something that he's been kicking around for a while. I mean, I was actually talking with with Mike Richardson. He says, "Oh, Frank's been threatening this book for a while," and I said, "Yeah, but I'm getting it. That's all I know."
And then one, let's see, you sent me another cover too. I just want to pop that up here.
Yeah. This is
Hide or Seek.
Hide or Seek is actually a young adult prose novel that I wrote. That's actually up for pre-order right now on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. It's coming out in April. And it's the book that I call What I Did on My COVID Vacation, in the nicest way possible, meaning that you're stuck at home, you're trying to find things to do, and we were kicking around ideas in animation, and then Kenneth Roquefort did some wonderful designs for me and just some great ideas, and we were trying to push it on animation, and then when it didn't work in animation, I just rolled it into a prose novel. And we'll see whether or not there's any interest in there. But I love doing it. I had a couple of writers working with me, helping me structure a prose novel because I never did it before. So I had to figure out the pacing and just the timing of it, which is great. And these are two guys that are also working on Pandora as well, and they were a great team. And I'm so glad that I'm working with them. Had a chance to work with them on it's Chris Silvestri and Anthony Marinville, and great to work with them on the book, but even better to have them as part of the team working on the Frank Miller Presents stuff too.
Yeah,
that's incredible,
this
man.
is all
I am
exciting.
so pumped. This is exciting.
great.
Now I know you're feeling like this new energy. You're building this new empire. I mean, Frank has to be also. Is he starting to feel that? Kind of like this is something you guys are building.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That was always the case. Because Frank's been fiercely independent forever. Basically, and this is just another extension of what he's done to date. So I think that's what's great about this. There's nothing happening that doesn't feel like a natural extension of a career. And again, we can all sit back. Frank, more than I even, could sit back and say, "Look, I had this great career. I'm going to sit back and just wallow in it, and just enjoy it." But that's not it. It's not just about doing more. It's also still learning. It's still growing, regardless of where you are in your career, of what you've accomplished to date. The last thing you want to do is just rest on your laurels. You want to be able to still be able to grow. And I think that's where the real energy and excitement comes from, is doing things you never did before. Trust me, frustrating as hell, but that sense of accomplishment when you do something you never did, I mean, it was funny. I was trying to put antifreeze in the car, and God, man, I couldn't figure out where the hell that shit goes anymore.
The way the cars are now, yeah, man.
And when I found it, that sense of accomplishment was amazing. I'm hoping to duplicate that with these books here right now.
There you go. Well, Dan,
guys
thanks so
will.
much for
Yeah.
coming on and chatting with us. We're very excited. As I've mentioned to you, whenever you guys have anything that's going to spread through social media, we'll help push
Oh,
the
thank you
good
so much.
word
That's
of
great.
this
Yep.
because we're very excited. I mean, this brings me, now I have something to look forward to. There's not too much I'm buying, at the local comic shop nowadays, but now at least I have something to look forward to,
That's
and
great. I'm
and
glad to
I
hear
hope
that. Yeah,
that
and
there's
that's
many years
the,
of success.
listen, our goal is to create books for people to read and enjoy. That's all. I mean, we're doing one variant cover on every book only because that's the model. But the reality is, we want people to buy our books. We want people to read our books. And so my goal is to start and hopefully build an audience more so than just start at a big hop and watch it all come apart. I think growing is the most important thing. That means we're bringing people in, and the more people in, the more strength and direction it gives to us to be able to push this line out forward and hopefully grow our business here too.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Well,
Anything
Dan,
else, Mr.
thank you.
Tucci?
No, thank you so much, Dan. This is
It's always a
great.
pleasure, man. Always good talking to you.
Yep. Yeah, we had some great times. Thank you for all the drinks and all the dinners and all and the work. Now I had a lot of fun when I worked over there, working with you guys.
I still
And
love
I guess I should.
Project Rock, man.
Yep, great.
Can I
Yes,
tell
great.
you what happened? Oh, wait. One quick story.
Yeah.
So, Billy, this is good news. So, when they're packing up my office, I wasn't there. They packed it up and they sent it to my home. I get a phone call saying, we got security in the building and we have a bomb squad coming in to take away the hand grenade you gave me.
Oh, geez.
They're calling me, and everybody's yelling, why do you have a hand grenade in your office?
What Tucci gave it to me. I also walked in a panel with that machine gun that time.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, it created a tense moment, which for that reason alone, I appreciate you.
Well, I apologize for that. But anyway, Dan, thank you so much. The best of luck to you guys with
Thank you so much, guys. Great talking to you both.
Yep. Anytime you want to come on, you want to share new things. Like I said, I'm really looking forward to these books, both your books, and I think you're doing the right thing by starting slow. So many people get, so many smaller independent publishers, they sort of write fast out of the gate. If you remember cross-gen, that sort of thing. And it's really not a great business plan. Start slow, build that up. And maybe there's something I could tell you, what we've done, and it'll just keep growing.
Yeah.
So salute to you.
I appreciate that because I feel that's the right direction for it all.
Yep. And they're going to be great. The books look fantastic. The ash can looks great. And so best of luck to you. And how about this? Happy 95th birthday, Steve Ditko.
Oh, yep.
Salute.
Good stuff, man. Thank you, guys. Thank you all. Thanks, guys, for the nice words on the screen here for the people watching along too. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan.
Right.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, Dan.
Thanks, everyone. And again, everyone, if you're new to the channel, make sure to look below, click that subscribe button, and smash that bell to get notifications when we go live and upload some new content. Everyone, have a wonderful rest of the week, and we'll see you all next week.
And www.frankmillerpresents.com, right?
You got it. That's it.
Link.
Perfect. Thank you.
Have a good one, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Hey everyone, thank you for joining us on Pop XP. If you haven't already, make sure to click that subscribe button and also click the bell for notifications when we go live and we upload some awesome new content. Also, don't forget to head on over to Twitter and follow us at the Pop XP and over on Instagram at the Pop XP. Thanks again everyone, and we'll see you soon.